So I think Ian's going to talk about various authors who've been associated with this area, particularly David Seabrook and T.S. Eliot. And for those of you who aren't already aware, with T.S. Eliot we are running a big programme called The Wasteland, which Trish over there is running, and that's going to culminate in a fantastic exhibition in 2018. But I'm going to hand over to Ian to talk for 15-20 minutes.
So I do tend to go on a bit, so I'll take the watch.
Thank you.
I remember in 1967, when the technology was much cruder than this, I found myself interviewing the anti-psychiatrist R.D. Laing, Ronnie Laing, who was a great figure of that time. And we were talking about films, and I asked him what he wanted to do because at that time there was all this Brechtian stuff about allowing the cameras to appear in the shot, breaking through that screen so the audience is part of the experience. And he said, I had a very shocking idea for a film I wanted to make for ITV, and they were interested in talking about it, but in the end they decided it was too sexually exciting. I said, well, what was that? He said, I just pour out a glass of water and it takes 20 minutes. In extreme close-up with water, he said it was too much for them. I just thought of that now, really what I should do in the nature of people walking around with baguettes on their heads, the sea out there, all that quote, is just literally keep on pouring water, letting it spill for 20 minutes. But I'm not that pure, so I'll throw a few words in to get it going. I imagine above us somewhere, floating right out there are two figures in heaven, or somewhere better than heaven, who really, probably the two unlikeliest companions. They know Gilbert and George, but they're both associated with this place, properly associated with this place. And in a strange way, in the way they're associated with Margate, defines two of the significant moments in recent culture. I'm talking recent back to the time of the First World War. One of them is T.S. Eliot, who is going to be celebrated and discussed here later. And the other is not quite so well known, but almost as dynamic, was a character called David Seabrook, who spent a lot of his time in Canterbury. And David Seabrook wrote a very interesting book called All the Devils Are Here, which appears in your printed forms as All the Devil's Horses, which is a nice mistake. I thought maybe we should talk about All the Devil's Horses. It would be like a Dennis Wheatley novel. But it would also be, and this is the other thing, I think these characters create their own force fields. That people who impinge on a place draw on the energies of that place, but it doesn't leave them unmarked. They bring something and they take something away. Just your fact of attending this today, with your attentions, your fragmented attention, seeing all the things and knowing it's going out into the world, makes something change. David Seabrook was certainly someone who made something change. I met him first. He appeared, I don't know how he got there, at my house, and he looked like a starving futurist. His head was shaven, he was trembling slightly, and he had produced various literary texts. I didn't know anything about his background, but the one he gave me was about T.S. Eliot and Margate. And it later evolved into various different forms. I heard from Simon that he actually used to be pacing up and down his room at the university in Canterbury, reciting early drafts of this essay. And it was a piece of research that drew on literary research. He read the biographies of Eliot, but he also stalked the territory. He became a figure of place, and he gave it the kind of energies of good fiction. So he turns up in Margate, and he places himself near Dreamland down there, and looks across the road, and he thinks he's looking at a memorial to Eliot, because he sees this building that seems to say T.S. Eliot. Actually, it's an anagram of that, it's toilets, and it's on the seafront, but it's where Eliot used to sit. He, as I'm sure you know, in the traumas after the First World War, and the well-honed neurotic difficulties of his marriage to Vivian Haigh Wood, they were competitively convalescent. It was a conspiracy of neurosis between them that cooked up beautifully, and basically their tourism was to find somewhere where they could convalesce over the last breakdown. And he'd been to see a doctor in London, and Lloyd's Bank, where he was working, gave him 3 months leave of absence to recover, and they picked on Margate. Vivian had just been to Torquay before that, which didn't work out so well. So Margate seemed a good choice. And they came to the Albemarle Hotel in Cliftonville, and Eliot insisted that Vivian came down with him to settle him in, and then she went away, left him on his own. And he came down to the shore, right there, where there was a sort of a nice hut where you could sit, and he watched the activities on the beach, and he managed to compose. He was not supposed to read books during this period, and he wasn't really supposed to write, but he composed 50 very important lines of The Wasteland here while he was doing this process. And he began to get a little fatter, a little better looking, because he was enjoying his 3 meals a day at the Albemarle. And he also had been given a mandolin by Vivian. So it seems like a strange cure to me, but he was learning to play the mandolin. He was absorbing the light and action of Margate, and he was dealing with a crisis of consciousness of the 20th century, all folded together in 1921. There's another kind of crisis of consciousness coming later, at a point when people begin to look at these territories and see them in a state of entropy and collapse. And that's when David Seabrook, this retro-futurist, arrives here out of Canterbury and begins to look very hard at Eliot, and not to treat him with that sort of papal sense that he'd almost achieved in the culture, but to see him as a human entity in a place that has a lot of other energies going on at the same time. I just want to give you a little flavour of David Seabrook and his prose, because this is the opening thing of All the Devils Are Here. He goes straight into it. And he's at Dreamland, which you can see outside. I drift past the entrance to Dreamland. Margate's main attraction opened its doors in 1920, importing the name from an amusement park on Coney Island, and the main ride, the Caterpillar, from Germany. While you queued for the big thrill, you could look down at your kids, looking down at you through the grille set in the huge horn head of the Snail Man, a tall wooden structure with stairs, and the park was also the place to get your pocket picked, and it probably still is. There's no money in Margate. This is before the term. There's no money in Margate. Eye contact has replaced it as the root of all evil. And yes, this town is as ripe as ever for a low-budget remake of Brighton Rock. The joyless amusement arcades, the facial scars. So what did I expect to find? Well, I never expected to find what I came for, but here it is, still standing and overlooking the sands. I move around inside, stamping on the bare boards and appraising the wood. It's the original Victorian timber. It's built for eternity. The benches are coated a ketchup red, beginning to flake, and the window frame in plastic replaces leaded glass. But I don't doubt for a moment that I've found it. Yes, I've looked for the plaque, and there isn't one. Margate plays a deeper game. When I grow tired of examining the sea shelter, I glance across at the building next to it, and it reads toilets. It takes a few moments for the spent penny to drop. I rub my eyes again and look. T.S. Eliot, Least We Forget. The Wasteland appeared in October 1922 in the first number of the Criterion, a literary quarterly, founded and edited by T.S. Eliot.